I'm Ava, and at 52 years old, I believed I knew everything there was to know about my husband, Liam. I thought our life together was a quiet, comfortable love story, a tapestry woven with shared dreams and gentle routines. On the sunny afternoon of our third wedding anniversary, I went to his downtown office to surprise him, a box of his favorite pastries in hand. But the real surprise, the one that would unravel everything I thought I knew, was waiting for me. The security guard at the entrance stopped me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and confusion, and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Hayes's wife is already here." In that single, heart-stopping moment, the man I had built my life with became a complete stranger. If you've ever felt the ground shift so violently beneath your feet that you thought you might fall into the earth, you'll understand my story. Please consider subscribing to our channel and supporting us for more stories that touch the heart. The day it all fell apart began with sunshine. I remember how the morning light, as golden and warm as honey, filtered through the sheer curtains of our bedroom, painting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. I stood before the mirror, smoothing the fabric of a light, sea-green summer dress I had chosen specifically for the occasion. Today was our third wedding anniversary, a small milestone, perhaps, in the grand scheme of a lifetime, but one that felt significant and precious to me. At 52, I had found in Liam a love that was calm, steady, and profound, a safe harbor after the turbulent waters of my younger years. He was the director at a massive construction firm, Stoneworth Dynamics, a job that demanded long hours and immense dedication. He often came home long after the sun had set, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his responsibilities. But he never failed to find the energy to listen to me, truly listen, as I recounted the small victories and frustrations of my day. My own work as a child psychologist at a private development center was fulfilling but less demanding in its hours, often leaving me with quiet afternoons to myself. It was in one of those quiet moments that the idea for the surprise had blossomed. I decided I would take him his absolute favorite treat, a dozen cream puffs from the little sugar mill bakery downtown, the ones with the rich vanilla custard that he adored. I imagined his face when I walked into his sterile corporate office, a flash of surprise followed by that slow, warm smile that always made my heart feel like it was coming home. It was a simple gesture, a small act of love to brighten an otherwise stressful workday, and remind him that we were a team, that I was thinking of him. I checked the clock on the mantelpiece. It was 3:30. Perfect. With my purse in one hand and the white pastry box in the other, I set off, my mind filled with happy anticipation. The bus ride downtown took about 20 minutes, a familiar journey through bustling streets that I barely noticed, lost as I was in my pleasant daydream of his reaction. The Stoneworth Dynamics corporate office was an imposing structure of glass and concrete, a modern 7-story complex that gleamed under the afternoon sun, surrounded by the meticulously manicured greenery of a small plaza. I had been here a few times before, always on Liam's arm for formal corporate events. So I knew the layout well enough: the polished marble lobby, the bank of elevators, the precise location of his corner office on the 5th floor. But today, something was different. As I pushed through the revolving glass doors, a heavy-set security guard I didn't recognize stepped into my path, raising a hand to stop me. He looked to be in his 50s, with dark hair streaked with gray, and a name badge that read Harrison. "Hold up," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Entry is prohibited to unauthorized personnel. Do you have an access pass or an appointment?" I was taken aback, a small laugh escaping my lips. He must be new. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, my smile warm. "I'm Liam Hayes's wife. He's the director. I just wanted to drop something off for our anniversary, a little surprise." "Oh," the guard, Harrison, looked at me intently, his eyes scanning my face, but there was no spark of recognition, only a steady, unwavering certainty that I was mistaken. A cold knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. "My apologies, ma'am," he said slowly, his tone unchanging. "But I see the director's wife practically every day, and you are definitely not her." The words hung in the air, sharp and unbelievable, sucking the warmth from the sunlit lobby. Before I could even process the blow, he tilted his head towards the exit. "In fact, here she comes now." I turned, my body moving as if in a dream, and saw her. She was tall and slender, her dark hair pulled back into an elegant, flawless bun. She wore an expensive, tailored business suit that spoke of power and success, and carried a designer leather handbag that probably cost more than my car. There was an air of poised confidence about her, an undeniable familiarity that made my heart leap into my throat with a painful thud. I recognized her. It was Isabella Vance, Liam's ex-wife, the woman he had divorced 5 years ago, long before he and I had ever met. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Miss Isabella," the guard called out, his voice now friendly and familiar. "I'll see you at the usual time tomorrow." "Of course, Mr. Harrison," she replied, her voice a smooth, melodious sound that grated on my raw nerves. "Tell Mr. Liam V. Hayes that I had to leave for a business matter. I'll see him tomorrow afternoon." She swept past me, her expensive perfume trailing in her wake, giving me no more attention than she would a piece of furniture, and headed towards the executive parking lot. I stood frozen, the box of cream puffs suddenly feeling like a 10-pound weight in my hand. My thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind, a storm of questions and disbelief. See you at the usual time tomorrow? Why was his ex-wife at my husband's office every single day? And more importantly, why did the security guard, a man who saw Liam's wife daily, know her so well and not me at all? In that moment, a strange clarity cut through the fog of my shock. I couldn't break down. I couldn't cause a scene. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to be clever. Taking a shaky breath, I turned back to the guard, forcing a look of embarrassed confusion onto my face. "Oh, my goodness," I said, feigning a dawning realization. "Excuse me, I must have the wrong building. I'm actually here to see a Mr. Bermudez in the Human Resources Department. We have an appointment." The guard's expression softened, satisfied that he had correctly identified and dealt with an imposter. He politely explained the way to the 3rd floor, and with a grateful nod, I walked towards the elevators, my heart hammering against my ribs, the sweet anniversary surprise now, a bitter taste of deception in my mouth. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the elevator doors whispered shut, encasing me in a sterile box of brushed steel and cold fluorescent light. I pressed the button for the 3rd floor, my finger trembling slightly. The box of cream puffs, once a symbol of love and celebration, now felt like a foolish, childish prop in a tragedy I didn't understand. I was an actress playing a part I hadn't auditioned for, pretending to visit a department that held no interest for me, all while my reality was crumbling. The lie had come so easily, a survival instinct kicking in, but beneath it, a cold dread was spreading through my veins. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, I stepped out and walked a few paces down the hall before ducking into the alcove for the other bank of elevators, the one that would take me to the 5th floor, to Liam's office. I had to see for myself. I had to know. The 5th floor was quieter, the air thick with the hushed importance of executive business. The plush carpet absorbed the sound of my footsteps as I moved cautiously down the long hallway toward Liam's office at the far end. His door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the corridor. My breath hitched. I crept closer, my body pressed against the cool wall, and peered around the corner, and there he was. He was sitting at his massive desk, his focus entirely on a set of blueprints spread before him. His dark hair was slightly tousled, the way it always was when he was deep in concentration, and his posture was slumped with a familiar weariness that tugged at my heart, even now. For a fleeting moment, he was just my Liam, my hard-working husband, and I felt a pang of guilt for my suspicion. But then, the door to his office swung open wider, and David Chen, the associate director, entered. David was a kind-faced, heavy-set man whose eyes seemed to be in a perpetual state of smiling. But today his expression was all business. "Liam, how are things going with the Parkside Boulevard project?" David asked, his voice low, but clear enough for me to hear. Miss Isabella submitted all the necessary paperwork. My heart began to beat faster, a painful, heavy thudding in my chest. So, it was true. Isabella was deeply involved in his work. "Yes, everything is in order," Liam replied, his voice tired but steady. "She'll bring the final calculations tomorrow. We wouldn't have been able to handle this project without her." David nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "It's a good thing you two were able to maintain a working relationship," he commented. "It doesn't work out for everyone, although I understand why you're keeping this collaboration quiet." A cold silence hung in the air for a moment before Liam responded, and his next words were the ones that truly broke me. "Isabella is a professional," he said briefly. "And as for Ava, I simply don't want to give her unnecessary reasons to worry. She can be too sensitive about these things sometimes." Too sensitive. The phrase echoed in my head, a condescending dismissal of my feelings, of my very character. It wasn't just that he was working with his ex-wife, it was that he was actively hiding it from me, not to protect me, but because he had judged me too fragile, too immature, to handle the truth. He was discussing me, his wife, with his colleague and his ex-wife, painting me as a needlessly emotional woman who needed to be shielded from the complexities of his life. The pain was sharp and suffocating, a betrayal far deeper than simple deception. It was a betrayal of respect. As David left the office, I knew I couldn't stay a moment longer. I couldn't risk him finding me there, a crying, eavesdropping wife, fulfilling his prophecy of being too sensitive. I fled, quickly making my way back to the elevator and down to the first floor. As I exited the building, the sun felt harsh and unforgiving. I saw Isabella's car, a sleek silver Honda sedan, pulling out of the parking lot. My mind, now sharp with a cold and focused anger, memorized the license plate. 547 LMA. The entire bus ride home was a blur. I stared out the window at the passing city, but I didn't see any of it. My mind was a relentless loop of questions. Why was he hiding this collaboration? What was so important about this Parkside Boulevard project that it required the expertise of his ex-wife and no one else? But the question that burned the brightest, the one that seared my soul, was how could I ever trust a husband who saw me not as a partner, but as a liability? A man who believed I was so emotionally frail that he had to curate the truth for my own good? When I got home, the silence of our apartment felt oppressive. I mechanically placed the box of pastries on the kitchen counter, the cheerful white box now a monument to my own foolishness. I settled onto the sofa to wait. He usually returned around 7 in the evening, but today the hours stretched into an eternity. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. Then 9. Finally, at 9:30, I heard his key in the lock. "Hey, sweetie," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion as he walked in. He leaned down and kissed me tiredly on the cheek. "Sorry I'm so late. So much work." I was delayed with important negotiations. The word negotiations struck a nerve. "What negotiations?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, but laced with an edge I couldn't hide. Liam looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "The Parkside Boulevard project," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Complex technical matters. What's going on? You seem a little strange tonight." A part of me wanted to scream, to throw the pastries at the wall, to demand he tell me about Isabella, about everything. But a calmer, more calculated part of me held back. I wasn't ready. I didn't have enough information. So I reined in the storm inside me. I bought your favorite cream puffs, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I wanted to bring them to the office, but I changed my mind. A genuine smile touched his lips, a smile that now felt like another layer of deceit. Thanks, sweetie, he said. And why bring them to the office? It's cozier at home. Besides, we're in such a tense situation with the project right now. Constant meetings. That single sentence was the final nail in the coffin of my trust. If everything were honest, if he had nothing to hide, he would have been touched by my desire to visit him. He wouldn't have so smoothly discouraged it. He wasn't just hiding something. He was actively building a wall around his work life to keep me out. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to find out what was on the other side of that wall. The next morning, Thursday, was shrouded in a surreal sense of normalcy. Liam woke up at his usual 6:30, the alarm buzzing softly. He showered, the sound of the water, a familiar drone. He came into the kitchen, dressed in one of his crisp business shirts, and kissed my forehead as I poured him coffee, just like he did every other day. But today, his touch felt foreign, his presence a heavy weight in the room. Every gesture, every word, felt like a performance. A scene from a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script had been rewritten. When he left for work at 8:30, I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street, and the facade of our ordinary life crumbled away, leaving behind the cold, hard framework of my new reality. My schedule for Thursdays was light. I only had morning classes with the children. By lunchtime, I was free. A dark, unsettling plan had been forming in the back of my mind since the night before. A plan that made me feel like a stranger to myself. My conscience screamed at me, telling me this was wrong, that I was violating the very foundation of our marriage. But the desire to know the truth, the whole unvarnished truth, was a raging fire that silenced every other voice. Shortly after 2 in the afternoon, I found myself back at the Stoneworth Dynamics building. This time, I didn't try to enter. Instead, I located a discreet bench in the plaza across the street, partially shaded by a large oak tree. From there, I had a clear view of the main entrance and the executive parking lot. As I had suspected, Isabella's silver Honda sedan was already parked in a reserved spot near the front. So, she had arrived this morning, or at least around lunchtime. She was in there right now, with my husband. I settled in to wait, the minutes stretching into an agonizingly long crawl. My mind, a cruel and inventive tormentor, began to paint vivid pictures of what might be happening on the 5th floor. I saw them in his office, heads bent close together over blueprints, their conversation shifting seamlessly from professional matters to shared memories, inside jokes from a life I was never a part of. I imagined them laughing, a casual intimacy in their gestures, a comfortable familiarity that 3 years of marriage to me had apparently not erased. The jealousy was a bitter, acidic taste in my mouth, a feeling so potent it made me physically ill. At precisely 3:30, the glass doors of the building swung open, and Isabella emerged. I tensed, expecting her to walk to her car, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and began walking down the street, away from the parking lot. My heart leaped. This was a deviation, an opportunity. Without a second thought, I stood up and hurried after her, trying to keep a safe distance, my steps muffled by the ambient noise of the city. She walked for 2 blocks before stopping at a small, charming cafe called Benny's Corner Bistro. She went inside, and I positioned myself across the street, partially hidden by a newsstand where I could see through the large picture window. I watched her sit at a small table near the front and order something from a waitress. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she meeting someone? A client? Another man? The suspense was unbearable. A few minutes later, my question was answered, but in a way I could never have prepared for. An older woman, likely a nanny, approached Isabella's table, and with her was a little boy. He looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, full of boundless energy, wearing a bright yellow t-shirt and cut-off denim shorts. The moment he saw Isabella, his face lit up, and he ran to her, throwing his arms around her legs in a tight hug. She leaned down, stroking his dark hair, and planting a kiss on his head. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I had to grip the newsstand to steady myself. After a few moments, the three of them, Isabella, the woman, and the boy, left the cafe and walked to a small playground nestled right next to it. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my throat so dry I couldn't swallow. Was it possible? The thought slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Did Liam have a child? A son from his first marriage that he had never, not once in all our years together, told me about? From my hiding spot, I watched the scene on the playground unfold. The boy laughed as he swung higher and higher on the swings, while Isabella and the other woman stood nearby, chatting like old friends. Every so often, Isabella would walk over to the boy, straighten his t-shirt, or whisper something in his ear that made him giggle. My eyes, desperate and horrified, scrutinized the boy's features, searching for a sign. Any sign that I was wrong. But the evidence was damning. He had dark, wavy hair, just like Liam's. The shape of his eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, was a startling echo of my husband's. And then I saw his chin. It was the exact same, a distinct and unmistakable feature I had traced with my own fingers 1,000 times. It was Liam's chin on a small boy's face. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely control them, but I managed to raise my phone and, through a haze of tears, take several blurry photos. My heart was beating so loudly, a frantic, panicked drum, that I was sure the whole street could hear it. This couldn't be happening. We had been married for 3 years. We had just started talking about having children of our own next year. How could he hide the existence of his own child from me for all this time? My mind flashed back to our first few months of dating. Elias had been guarded about his past, speaking of his first marriage only in vague, clipped sentences. I had assumed it was because the memories of the failed relationship were too painful for him. I had respected his silence, believing I was giving him the space he needed to heal. But now, I saw it for what it was. Not pain, but concealment. He wasn't healing. He was hiding a 5-year-old secret. I tried, for a split second, to put myself in his shoes. How do you tell the new woman you're falling for that you have a child with the ex-wife you're trying to leave behind? Maybe he was afraid of scaring me off. But that was then. We were husband and wife now for 3 years. 3 years of shared holidays, of quiet nights, of whispered promises. How could a secret of this magnitude survive for so long in the intimacy of a marriage? Suddenly, so many small, insignificant moments from our life together clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The strange phone calls where he would suddenly grow quiet and move to another room, later dismissing them as work matters. The times he was delayed at the office without a clear explanation or had to leave on weekends for unspecified errands. I had always trusted him implicitly, never questioning him, because I believed trust was the bedrock of our love. Now, every one of those episodes seemed suspicious, each one a potential lie, another brick in the wall he had built around his secret life. I paced my apartment like a wounded animal, swiping through the photos on my phone. The boy's face so much like Liam's, a constant, searing accusation. The facts were undeniable. Isabella was at my husband's office every day. The guard thought she was his wife. And now, there was a child who looked so much like Liam, it made my soul ache, whom she met with after leaving my husband's side. There was no other explanation. My husband had a son, and he had been lying to me since the day we met. The night was a long and sleepless ordeal. I lay beside Liam, staring into the darkness, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the frantic chaos in my mind. I tried to piece together the fragments of what he'd told me about his first marriage. He had always been so vague, describing their breakup as a quiet, mutual decision. "We just had different visions of life," he'd said once, shrugging. "We separated peacefully. No scandal, no drama." I had accepted his words at face value, never wanting to pry into a past that caused him pain. But now, that peaceful separation seemed like a convenient story, a carefully constructed narrative designed to obscure the one piece of drama he couldn't afford to reveal. A son. He had never once mentioned children, but perhaps he had simply avoided the topic at the start of our relationship. And as time went on, the lie grew too big, the confession too awkward and complicated to make. I even tried to find some empathy in my heart, to imagine his predicament. How do you tell a new woman that you have a child from a previous marriage, especially if the relationship with the ex-wife remains complicated? But my empathy withered in the face of the truth. We had been living together as husband and wife for 3 years. 3 years. How could he look me in the eye every single day and hide something so fundamental? On Friday, a new resolve had hardened within me. My morning classes with the children were a blur of mechanical movements and forced smiles. As soon as I was done, I went back to the Stoneworth Dynamics office. But this time, I had a more decisive plan. I wasn't just going to watch from a distance. I was going to find tangible proof. I waited until I saw Isabella enter the building shortly after 2 o'clock. Then I walked calmly but quickly into the executive parking lot. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached her silver Honda sedan, parked in its usual spot. I felt like a criminal, my actions a complete betrayal of the woman I used to be. But I had to know. I peered cautiously through the tinted window of the back seat, and my breath caught in my throat. There it was, a small child's backpack, emblazoned with colorful pictures of superheroes. It had to be the boys. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place, each one forming a more damning picture. At 3:30, just as she had the day before, Isabella left the building. But today, she didn't walk. She got directly into her car and drove away. Panic seized me for a second. I was going to lose her. On pure instinct, I pulled out my phone and called a rideshare, my voice trembling as I gave the operator my location. A car arrived within minutes. "See that silver Honda just turning the corner?" I asked the driver, jumping into the back seat. "Can you follow it, please? Keep a safe distance." The driver, a kind-faced man in his 40s, glanced at me in the rearview mirror, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Following someone, huh?" he asked gently. "Is the husband cheating?" The question, so blunt and yet so close to my fears, made me flinch. "Something like that," I mumbled, turning to stare out the window, my cheeks burning with a mixture of shame and desperation. Isabella drove towards one of the city's quieter residential neighborhoods, finally stopping in front of a nondescript 9-story apartment building on a street called Riverview. She got out of her car and disappeared inside. "Could you please wait for a few minutes?" I asked the driver. He simply nodded, already engrossed in the news on his phone. I slipped out of the car and entered the lobby. A tenant list was mounted on the wall. My eyes scanned the column of surnames, my finger tracing down the list. Jones, Miller, Harrison, and then Price. Isabella's maiden name. The listing read, Price, Sophia, apartment 43. So, Isabella's sister lived here. That must be the other woman from the park. A new wave of questions washed over me. Why was her sister still using her maiden name? And what did this have to do with Liam? I took the elevator to the 4th floor and crept down the hallway until I found apartment 43. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices from within a woman's voice, and the clear, high-pitched voice of the little boy. "Auntie Isabella, are we going to the park today?" the boy asked. "Of course, Leo. Isabella replied. First, we'll eat and give Mommy her medicine. And when will Mommy be all better? The boy's voice was small, filled with a child's simple worry. Soon, little man, the doctor said in about a week she can pick you up from daycare herself. I stood motionless in the hallway, the words washing over me. Mommy is sick. So that's why Isabella was picking up the child, Leo. She was helping her sister. But this new information didn't solve the central, agonizing mystery. Whose child was he? And why did he look so much, so unnervingly, like my husband? I retreated quietly and got back into the waiting car. Did you find what you were looking for? The driver asked, his curiosity piqued. Not quite yet, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. About half an hour later, Isabella and Leo came out of the building. They got back into the Honda and drove towards the downtown area. I asked the driver to follow them again. This time, Isabella stopped at a large children's clinic. She and the boy went inside. I paid the driver, thanking him for his patience, and followed them into the brightly colored lobby. There was a short line at the reception desk, so I stood in it, giving me a perfect vantage point to observe them as they sat in the waiting area. Leo was fussy, not wanting to sit still, and Isabella was the picture of patience, calmly trying to entertain him with a picture book. Then, a nurse appeared at a doorway, holding a clipboard. Wells, Leo M.? She called out. I listened intently, the name echoing in the busy waiting room. Wells, not Hayes, and the middle initial, M. Not L for Liam. The relief was so sudden and so overwhelming that it buckled my knees. I leaned against the wall, tears welling in my eyes, a strangled sob caught in my throat. He wasn't Liam's son. The entire horrifying narrative of a secret child that I had spent the last 24 hours building in my mind was a fiction. He was not Liam's son, but the wave of joy was quickly replaced by a fresh tide of confusion. If the boy wasn't his, then why did he resemble my husband so perfectly? And why would Liam be so deeply and secretly involved in the life of his ex-wife's nephew? I decided to see it through. I followed them from the clinic to the pharmacy, and then to the same park from the day before. As they sat on a bench, a young woman joined them. It was her sister, Sophia. She looked very pale and fragile, but she smiled brightly when Leo ran to hug her. I moved closer, pretending to take photographs of the ducks in the pond, my phone angled just enough to overhear their conversation. How are you feeling, Sophia? Isabella asked, her voice full of concern. Better, her sister replied. The doctors say I can go back to work Monday. Thank you so much for watching Leo. It's nothing. He's my nephew, and I love spending time with him. Then Sophia asked the question that made my blood run cold. And Mr. Liam V. Hayes doesn't object to you spending so much time on us. My breath caught. Liam understands, Isabella said softly. He knows our situation. He even loaned me money for the treatment when I reached out to him. I'll have to pay him back as soon as I get my salary. Don't rush it, Isabella insisted. The main thing is for you to make a full recovery. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. It all came crashing down on me. Liam was helping them. He had loaned his ex-wife money for her sister's life-saving surgery. The boy's resemblance to him was nothing more than a bizarre, cruel coincidence. The entire web of lies I had imagined was of my own making. But the truth, in its own way, was just as painful. My husband was performing an act of incredible kindness and generosity, and he had deliberately, consciously, chosen to hide it all from me. That evening at home, I was a ghost in my own life. The overwhelming relief that Liam didn't have a secret child was real, but it was quickly overshadowed by a new, more insidious kind of pain. On the one hand, my husband was a good man, a man who would secretly loan his ex-wife a significant amount of money to save her sister's life. On the other, he was a man who didn't trust me enough to share this noble act. He had weighed the options and decided that my potential jealousy was a greater risk than the damage his secrecy would cause. He had painted me in his own mind as a petty, insecure woman and had acted accordingly. The insult of that assumption cut deeper than any imagined affair. He wasn't just hiding his connection to Isabella, he was hiding his own virtue from me, deeming me unworthy of knowing the true depth of his character. What did that say about our marriage? What did that say about his respect for me as his partner? The weekend passed in a thick, suffocating fog of artificial normalcy. On Saturday, we went to the mall, bought groceries for the week, and in the evening, we watched a movie, curled up on the couch as if nothing was wrong. But I felt a chasm between us, a cold, empty space filled with all the things he wasn't telling me. Every touch felt calculated, every smile seemed to mask a deeper thought. His phone rang twice, and both times, he quickly moved to another room to answer, his voice a low, indecipherable murmur. Before, I would have thought nothing of it. Now, each quiet conversation felt like a confirmation of his secret life, another deliberate exclusion. That evening, as the credits rolled on the movie, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. "Liam?" I said softly, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the living room. "I feel like something hasn't been right between us lately." He turned to look at me, his expression a careful mask of surprise. "What do you mean?" "You've become distant," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "You talk very little about work, and you're often distracted." He let out a sigh, running a hand over his face. "Just lots of things going on," he replied evasively. "It's a tense period at work." "Maybe I can help somehow," I pushed gently. "Listen, support you." Liam paused, a flicker of an internal debate crossing his features. Then, he seemed to make a decision. "There is a situation," he finally admitted, "but I don't want to burden you with it." My heart started beating faster. This was it. "Tell me," I urged, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "We are husband and wife. We're supposed to share everything." He was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "It's Sophia, Isabella's sister," he began. "She was recently in the hospital, a serious surgery." He watched my face for a reaction, and when I said nothing, he continued. "Isabella asked for help with her nephew while Sophia was recovering." "And you're helping?" I asked, my tone carefully neutral. "Well, yes," he said. And then came the carefully crafted half-truth. "Isabella sometimes works with us as an outside consultant, and now there's this situation. I had to loan her some money for the treatment." I noticed immediately how he minimized their collaboration, painting it as a rare occasional thing, not the daily partnership I knew it to be. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with a guilt that seemed genuine. "I was afraid you would misunderstand," he confessed. "The ex-wife at work every day? Any woman in your place wouldn't be happy about that." His words were both a relief and a profound insult. He was finally admitting something, but his excuse confirmed my worst fear. He saw me as a cliché. "And what is there to misunderstand here?" I asked, a bitter edge to my voice. "You're helping a sick woman and a child. That's a wonderful, noble thing to do." "You're not jealous?" he asked, his uncertainty palpable. "Jealous of a sick woman and her child?" The thought was absurd, but his question revealed everything about how he perceived me. I knew then that he was still hiding the true extent of his daily interactions with Isabella. The next morning, Sunday, Liam seemed calmer, as if his partial confession had lifted a great weight from his shoulders. Over breakfast, he even started talking about Isabella himself, a move that stunned me. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee, "I think you two should meet. She's a good person. We just didn't work out in the marriage." I nearly choked on my toast. "Meet her?" "Well, yeah," he continued, oblivious to my shock. Since we sometimes work together and now we're helping her family, it's silly to pretend you don't know her. Again, that careful phrase, sometimes work together. He was still managing the truth, feeding me a version he thought I could handle. I spent the rest of the day in a state of turmoil. He hadn't mentioned that Isabella was at his office every single day, that the security guard mistook her for his wife, or that they were the two key figures on a massive project. Why was he still holding back, even while pretending to open up? On Monday, I couldn't take it anymore. After my morning sessions, I went back to the office building, not to spy, but to force a confrontation. At the entrance, I was greeted by the same guard, Harrison. He smiled knowingly. "Trying to get to the director again?" He chuckled. "Perhaps you're mistaken," I suggested, my voice tight. "Maybe that woman is just an employee." Harrison let out a hearty laugh. "What employee? Miss Isabella has been working here for several months now. She comes every day. The director takes her everywhere with him, to meetings, to construction sites. Just recently, he brought her a huge bouquet of flowers for her office. The vase is still right there. Flowers. Joint trips to construction sites." My heart sank. This was far more intimate than a simple working relationship. Just then, as if summoned by the conversation, Liam and Isabella entered the building together, deep in a serious discussion over a set of blueprints. That was it. I made up my mind. I stepped out from the corner where I'd been standing and walked straight towards them. "Liam," I called out. He turned, and the color drained from his face. "Ava, what are you doing here?" I held up a bag from a cafe I'd stopped at on the way. "I decided to bring you lunch." I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. Isabella looked from him to me, her expression curious and unreadable. "Isabella, let me introduce you," Liam said, the tension in his voice thick enough to cut with a knife. "This is my wife, Ava. Ava. This is Isabella Vance, the architect. We're working together on the project." "Nice to meet you," Isabella said, extending a cool, slender hand. "Liam has told me so much about you." The lie was so blatant it was almost funny. An uncomfortable silence descended. "I should go," Isabella said finally, breaking the tension. She turned to me. "It was a pleasure meeting you." After she left, Liam led me up to his office, past a stunned-looking Harrison. The office was spacious and bright. And there, on the windowsill, was a beautiful crystal vase filled with a dozen perfect white roses. "They're beautiful," I said, nodding towards the flowers. "Who gave them to you?" Liam's face flushed slightly. "It's a work gift," he stammered. "From the whole project team when we signed the Parkside Boulevard contract." I knew he was lying. Teams don't give gifts like that. It was personal. My eyes scanned the desk and landed on a silver-framed photograph I hadn't noticed before. It was of him and Isabella, standing together in front of a building under construction, both wearing hard hats and smiling broadly at the camera. She was leaning slightly towards him, her shoulder almost touching his, a pose of easy intimacy. "Liam, I think you're still hiding something," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "The guard downstairs said he sees her every day, and has for several months." Liam sighed heavily, sinking into his chair. "He finally told me the rest of the professional story, that she'd been working there for 4 months, that they were in constant contact." "Why?" I whispered. "Why hide all of this?" His answer was the same tired refrain. "Because I knew you would worry. The ex-wife at work every day. I was afraid." That evening, after a silent, tension-filled dinner, I found myself standing in our bedroom while he was in the shower. His phone was on the nightstand. My conscience screamed, but the desire to know if there was anything left he was hiding was stronger. I picked it up. My hands trembled as I opened his messages. The correspondence with Isabella was extensive. There were dozens of work messages, but woven between them were more personal ones. Thank you for the support. I don't know what I would do without you. And then I saw the most recent exchanges. Her thanking him for the money, saying her sister was getting discharged. His reply, don't rush the money. The main thing is that everyone is healthy. Give Leo my love. Her next message made my blood run cold. He's asking when Uncle Liam is coming to visit. And his reply, we'll see. Right now, Ava doesn't know anything about the situation. Olivia's response was the final twist of the knife. I understand, but maybe you should tell her. She's not an outsider. And Liam's final message. Eventually. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. He was discussing me, our marriage, his decision to lie to me with his ex-wife. When he came out of the shower, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, the phone in my hand. What's wrong? He asked. Elias, please forgive me, I whispered. I checked your phone. He froze, a towel in his hand. Why? I needed to know the whole truth. I read the messages with Isabella, about her sister, about Leo, and about how you're not ready to talk to me about any of it. He sat down heavily beside me. Ava, if there's no trust between us, then there's no marriage, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. You need to trust me. I'm trying to, I cried, the tears finally coming. But you hid so much. You even discuss our relationship with her. I don't discuss our relationship, he corrected, though it was a weak defense. I was just explaining why I couldn't tell you yet. Why couldn't you? I demanded. Why, Liam? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep, painful honesty. Because I was afraid, he said, his voice cracking. Afraid that you would misunderstand, that you would think I still felt something for Isabella, and I don't. I only feel friendship and gratitude that we could end things peacefully. I looked into my husband's honest, tear-filled eyes, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the storm inside me began to calm. His fear, so raw and palpable, was not the fear of a man caught in a sordid affair, but the fear of a man terrified of hurting the person he loved most. Elias, I said, my voice quiet but firm, a silent plea for the end of all secrets. I'm ready for the whole truth. Please, tell me everything. From the beginning. He got up from the bed and walked over to the window, staring out at the city lights as he gathered his courage. When he finally turned back to me, his expression was resolute. Okay, he said, everything. He told me how, about a year ago, he was offered the biggest project of his career, the Parkside Boulevard residential complex. It was a massive undertaking, and he needed a world-class architect, but everyone he trusted was already booked. It was David Chen who had suggested he reach out to Isabella. He knew she was a brilliant specialist who was looking for a new project at the time. At first, I refused, Liam admitted. It felt complicated. But then I realized that our personal history shouldn't get in the way of a major business opportunity. It would be unprofessional. So he met with her, they discussed the project, and Isabella agreed, but only on the strict condition that their past was in the past. Their relationship would be strictly professional. And for a while, it was. But then, Sophia's health took a turn for the worse. He explained that Sophia's husband had died tragically in an accident 2 years prior, leaving her to raise their son, Leo, all alone. When the doctors told her she needed major surgery and she had no way to pay for it, Isabella, in a moment of sheer desperation, reached out to Liam. I couldn't say no, Ava, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She never asks for anything. For her to come to me, I knew it was the last resort. While Sophia was hospitalized, Isabella had to juggle her demanding work schedule with picking Leo up from daycare and taking him to appointments. A few times, when Isabella was stuck in critical meetings, Liam had stepped in, driving the little boy to the doctor. And I just grew attached to him, Liam confessed. He's a great kid, and there's this unbelievable coincidence. Everyone says he looks strikingly similar to his father, who apparently looked a lot like me. Leo even noticed the resemblance, so he was just naturally drawn to me. Now, finally, everything was making sense. And you didn't tell me any of this because you were afraid of my reaction? I asked softly. Imagine how it would look from the outside, he pleaded. Your husband is working with his ex-wife every single day. He's giving her a large sum of money, and he's spending time with her nephew, who looks just like him. I thought it looked like a betrayal of our marriage. I went to him and took his hand. Liam, betrayal is when you deceive or lie to hurt someone, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Helping people who are in trouble is nobility. Yes, you hid things, and that hurt me more than I can say. But now, I understand why. He pulled me into a fierce embrace, burying his face in my hair. Forgive me, Ava. No more secrets, I promise. I promise too, I whispered back, feeling the foundations of our marriage, once cracked, begin to settle into a new, stronger alignment. The next afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Ava. It's Isabella Vance. We met yesterday. I was stunned into silence for a moment. I was wondering if I could meet with you, she asked, her voice hesitant. To talk, heart to heart. I feel like problems have arisen between you and Liam because of me, and I'd like to clear the air. We agreed to meet at Benny's Corner Bistro, the very cafe where my nightmare had begun. When I arrived, she was already there, but today she looked completely different. Gone was the severe business suit, replaced by simple jeans and a light blouse. Without the corporate armor, she looked younger, more approachable. Thank you for coming, she said, her smile genuine. I know what you must think of me. The ex-wife who's always around. But things aren't what they seem. She then told me her side of the story, confirming that her divorce from Liam was painful but amicable, and that they had managed to remain friends. But then she revealed something that shocked me. When we started working together, she explained, stirring her coffee, I was the one who asked Liam not to tell you. I asked him not to publicize our communication. I must have looked confused, because she elaborated. I had a bad experience a few years ago. A friend of mine got remarried, and his new wife raised an absolute scandal when she found out he and I still spoke occasionally, even though there was nothing between us. I didn't want to be the cause of that kind of trouble in Liam's new family, in your family. The weight of that confession settled on me. It wasn't just Liam's fear, it was Isabella's request, born from a desire to protect me. And when your sister got sick? I asked. Again, that was my fault, she said, her gaze direct. I was ashamed that I had to ask my ex-husband for money, and I was terrified you would think I was some kind of manipulator, taking advantage of his kindness. It turned out that Liam's secrets were woven not just from his own fears, but from a shared, albeit misguided, desire to shield my feelings. I felt a sudden urge to be completely honest as well. Isabella, last week I followed you from the office. I saw you with Leo at the park. An awkward silence fell between us, and then, to my surprise, she laughed. A real, genuine laugh. You followed us? Wow. And what did you think? That Leo was Liam's secret son? I blushed, nodding sheepishly. Honestly? Yes. Oh my goodness, she said, shaking her head. How you must have suffered. Leo is my sister's son. His father, Marcus, died in a car accident 2 years ago. The crazy thing is, Sophia always said that Marcus looked strikingly like Liam. That's the resemblance. She then smiled softly. Just so you know, there's no threat. I've moved on. I'm seeing someone, a child psychologist named Dominic Foster. He's wonderful. That evening, I told Liam everything about following Isabella, about my wild suspicions of a secret child, and about my meeting with her. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he didn't get angry. he just asked, his voice full of a quiet sadness. You really thought I had a son, and that I could hide him from you for all these years? Ava, if I had a son, from the first day we met, I would only ever talk about him. I knew in my heart he was right. I was scared, I whispered. Scared to hear a truth I couldn't handle. He pulled me close. Silly girl, he murmured. I hid everything precisely because I love you and didn't want you to suffer. And in the end, you suffered even more because of it. We both apologized that night, I for my distrust and my spying, and he for his secrecy. A few days later, Liam came home with an unexpected proposal. How about we invite Isabella and her family over for lunch on Sunday? Sophia is out of the hospital, and it would be good to clear the air completely. Besides, he added with a smile, Leo constantly asks when he can visit Uncle Liam. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to definitively close this painful chapter and begin a new one. On Saturday, we prepared for our guests together, a team once again. Liam told me more about Sophia and her late husband, about their struggles and her incredible strength, and my heart filled with compassion. On Sunday, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Isabella, holding a bouquet of flowers. Next to her was a shorter woman with kind eyes. Sophia, and hiding between them was Leo. The afternoon was surprisingly relaxed and filled with laughter. Sophia was warm and funny, and she thanked Liam profusely for his help. You have a wonderful husband, Ava, she said to me at one point. There aren't many people like him. And looking at him as he played with Leo on the floor, my heart swelled with a love and pride that had been absent for weeks. We even laughed about my spying when Sophia explained, Of course, everyone says Leo looks like Mr. Hayes. My late husband looked so much like him, they could have been twins. The only awkward moment came when Leo declared loudly, Mommy, Uncle Liam is going to be my new daddy. After the initial shock, Liam handled it beautifully, kneeling beside the boy and explaining that while he had his wife, Auntie Ava, they could all be the best of friends. Later, while the men were occupied with Leo, I found myself in the kitchen with Sophia. On an impulse, I said, Our development center is looking for a bookkeeper's assistant. Would you be interested? Her face lit up with a hope I hadn't seen all day. As the guests were leaving, Elias looked at me, a soft smile on his face. Well, he said, wrapping an arm around my waist. That went well, and now we have new friends, and you might have a new colleague. The house was quiet again, filled with a peaceful, happy energy. Liam, I said, stopping in the middle of the kitchen, forgive me one more time for everything. He hugged me tightly. Stop apologizing. I'm also to blame. I should have told you everything from the start. He pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious. You know, he said cautiously, seeing how you were with Leo today, it made me realize you would be a wonderful mom. Maybe we should start thinking about having children too. I looked at him in surprise, and then a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I think that's a wonderful idea. A year later, I sat in the quiet of our nursery, rocking my 3-month-old daughter, Ava, in my arms. The summer sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, and a profound sense of peace settled over me. So much had changed since that tumultuous week that had nearly torn my world apart. Our lives had blossomed in ways I could never have imagined. Sophia took the job at my center and thrived, eventually marrying a wonderful man, the center's program coordinator, who adored her and officially adopted Leo. Isabella and her wonderful Dominic were married in the fall, a beautiful ceremony where Leo was the proud ring bearer. Our circle of friends, once separated by secrets and suspicion, had merged into what we jokingly called our great company, a new, blended, and beautifully unconventional family. Liam and I had found our way back to each other, our marriage stronger and more honest than ever before. And our beautiful Eva was the living proof of our renewed love. Looking back, I often think about how easily I could have destroyed everything. My fear and my insecurity had built a prison of suspicion around me, and I had almost mistaken my husband's kindness for betrayal. The great family secret that I had been so terrified of uncovering turned out not to be a secret of infidelity at all, but a testament to the power of compassion. It was a lesson in the complexity of human relationships, that past loves can evolve into friendships, that families can be forged not just by blood, but by shared kindness and support during life's hardest moments. I learned that true strength in a partnership doesn't come from avoiding difficult truths, but from facing them together with courage and an open heart. My journey through doubt and fear ultimately led me to a place of deeper understanding and a love more profound than I had ever known. Life rarely gives us simple, easy stories. It presents us with tangled webs of past relationships, present challenges, and future uncertainties. It is in these moments that we have a choice: to retreat into fear and suspicion, or to lead with trust and ask the hard questions. If our story has touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel and supporting our work. Your presence here allows us to continue sharing stories of healing, forgiveness, and the incredible resilience of the human heart. Thank you for listening.